Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. This is the third and last day of the International Conference on Insurance 2018. It is a pleasure to count on your attendance. Today we have a very interesting agenda, such as yesterday's. Today we're going until noontime. So let's get started. So please silence your mobile phones and please wear your badge all the time. Okay, this is the invitation of FIDES, the Insurance Federation.
Bolivia te espera.
We have had a change in our agenda. Mr. Francois Bourguignon was not able to make it as we had anticipated, but we are going to have a wonderful closing with Xavier Sala Martin. He is going to be closing today's event. He is a well-known economist worldwide. So we will welcome him later on. We would like to invite the Director of the National Planning Department, Gloria Amparo Alonso Masmela, who will talk about the basis of the National Development Plan. We will also like to invite Mr. Esteban Piedrahito, President of the Chamber of Commerce of Cali, and also Mr. Botero. Good morning to each and every one of you. Mr. Botero, thank you for this invitation. Esteban, how are you? Well, I think, Mr. Botero, that the people will be joining us shortly. Thank you very much for this invitation. What we are going to do today is to present not that much the base for the plan, but the lines of the National Development Plan. What are we considering? The base of the plan is submitted mid-November to the committee, which is a top-level committee that includes citizens, governors, mayors, and an important debate is held at the national level. What we want to do, and following the guidelines given by the president, to tell you what should be the lines of the National Development Plan that we have called a Agreement for Colombia and Agreement for Equity. And why is this like an agreement for Colombia? That's the first question. Because what President Duque wants is for this agreement, for this national development plan to be built amongst all of us. He wants to have like a national invitation. Citizens, local, regional governors will help us build a national development plan. If we achieve it, if it can be attained that manner, that commitment produced will be done when we are building this national development plan, and it produces or results in the commitment of all those participating in it. So, as I said before, the idea is to invite citizens and everybody should make its contributions regarding that, regarding this plan. It's not only to have a 4-year plan, it's to set some long-term paths that go beyond this administration, in which we should all be thinking, what do we want to have as a country in the future? Today, we are facing huge challenges, like it's like the fourth industrial revolution, blockchain, etc. And that imposes many transformational challenges that makes us think about that long-term line that we should leave for the following generations. Why this agreement for Colombia and this agreement for equity? The country has moved forward. We have had quite a social change in this century, but we still have many challenges ahead of us. Within the progress made, we have had an important drop in the number of poor people. And at the same time, the middle class is growing. As of 2014, the middle class exceeds the group of people under poverty. However, there's still a group that deserves much attention. And I'm going to give an example of this. We've had governments geared towards assistance. We talk about Familias en Acción and many other subsidies. However, we are not creating survival conditions. So what we should try is for this population that is receiving subsidies for that support to be transformed into the creation of income by those receiving government's assistance. So the task is to achieve the social transformation in the long term, or perhaps during the last 15 years, we have achieved a poverty reduction. Between 2008 and 2017, we went from a population under poverty conditions from 18.2 million people and to 12.9. So we still have a vast number of people under extreme conditions. That's 6 million people to whom we should really devote our attention. Of those 3.6 million people under extreme poverty, we have that 1.9 are in the cities and 1.7 are in the rural areas. It's more scattered, it's more complex to serve that population under extreme poverty conditions. But one of the main tasks, one of the main agendas should be that this country, as we say, it is a country of mid to high income, that it has 3.6 million people under extreme conditions. This should not happen. And if more than half of this are in the cities, then there is an agenda for large cities to contribute in its eradication. We have reduced the inequality, the Gini coefficient, during the past 14 to 15 years. Have had an important drop. However, we have to continue working on this, and during the same period, it achieved a twofold improvement in the Gini coefficient. So the agenda should be pretty focused on reducing these inequalities. In the departments, we have high levels of violence, and I think that these are clear diagnostics, and we still have an agenda in legal, justice, legality terms that puts this topic on the agenda, and that's to work in order to correct those high level of violence. Over 46% of the departments have violence level above the national average as to homicide. And obviously, the regional gaps, there's some similarities. Chocó, Guajira are the regions that deserve special treatment, but child mortality rate, we see that cities of a same region as is the Pacific region are in the two extremes. Cali has the lowest child mortality rate compared to countries of high income such as Uruguay, while in Vaudo, the conditions could be very, very similar to those of Ethiopia. And vaccination conditions in La Guajira are at very low levels. Or, for example, homicide rate. For example, in Chocó, Quibdó, Chocó is at the level of El Salvador. And for example, Sogamoso, Boyacá, the rates could be considered or could be compared to countries as Canada. Intermediate education, which should also be part of our agenda. This shows the regional gaps in Chocó. Chocó is at the level of the poorest countries of the world, while in this case, Norte de Santander is at the level of countries such as Denmark, which coverage is 100%. So there are some regional gaps that we must bridge and correct in the agenda of the National Development Plan. National productivity, it is clear that if we do not attain progress in productivity, less likely we're going to reach progress in growth. The national productivity has been stagnant when important investments have been made in capital. You see that any national investment contributes very little. to this productivity. The same thing with human talent. Our population has aged, so investments in human capital is very little. What they can contribute to growth, while productivity has been lagging behind, especially if we compare it to countries, to other countries. We have seen a lot of articles and research work where the productivity agenda in Colombia should be in the first line regarding our national development plan. Formality, informality is a concern to all of us. We cannot ignore that we have reduced the informality rate, mainly in urban areas. But at the national level, it's a challenge that's still very important. The number of informal occupied people is very high if you compare it to the percentage of occupied people in the formal sector. What's clear here is that in Colombia, we are known for excessive regulation. We want to legislate everything. We want to have decrees in everything. And I think that's the best example. This is data from the National Development Plan. We have a regulation observatory. And what we have seen is that during the past 17 years, we have issued more than 94,000 rules. That's almost 3 decrees per day. Per day, we can issue 11 resolutions, 0.3 official letters, 15.4 standards. So if we correct everything related to regulation, to standards, and to make things easier to companies, I didn't bring this slide that shows that, but it's been demonstrated that an excessive regulation and excessive regulation, rules, standards, if we will correct that, we could correct the informality the country has. Well, public spending is not of quality. We have excess public spending. We have too many subsidies, which account for 9% of GDP. That is 72 billion pesos of the budget is for a subsidy policy, and we need to go over that. Well, you are well known. You know much about this burden regarding pensions. This is not only in terms of income, but it is inequitable, mainly because of the pension burden. Pensions are focused on that percentage of the population of higher income. If we would correct the pension-related topic and the subsidies, we will see that inequality will improve, but it's still a very important weight on the general budget of the nation or when allocating resources effectively. The social change is compromised from here on. Hence, we need to eliminate the barriers that are limiting this social transformation. We have productivity stagnation. We have a public spending that is highly inefficient. We have huge territorial differences in economic development and quality of life. There is a regulatory environment that doesn't encourage competition, high labor informality, and high business informality, high dependence on mining and hydrocarbon with a very low productive transformation. We have tax and regulatory costs that hinder business activity. We have ahead of us um, post-conflict territorial stabilization agenda, and we have to consolidate a middle class, which implies a social demand transformation. In other words, the state should be transformed in order to satisfy all those needs. Hence, what we want is for national development plan to set an action course to remove obstacles and to stimulate those factors that will increase productivity. Which are the lines of the National Development Plan? This is, well, I just presented a diagnostics. I don't think I had to dwell that much on the diagnostics. You're all familiar with it. But which is the equation on which we would like to work on in order to reach equality? Those that have listened to President Duque, he's always stressing this. Legality plus entrepreneurship should allow us to reach equality. That these are the three lines of the National Development Plan, to make all the necessary adjustments in terms of legality to approve entrepreneurship policies in the search for equality. As to legality, we have to work in terms of security, justice, and coexistence in order to guarantee equality. We have an agenda of transparency and fight against corruption, and this goes hand in hand in foreign policy and sovereignty. As to entrepreneurship, it is a vast agenda. We have to work in strategies of productive development and internationalization. Now that we are talking about the fourth industrial revolution and the technological revolution, the country needs to adapt to all those progresses. So this needs to be part of our plan's agenda, together with regulatory improvement, competition, financing, and rural development and transformation. This necessarily has to go hand in hand with environmental sustainability, green growth, science and technology, well, and obviously innovation. You've heard what President Duque has said. How should we try to maintain investment in exploration, oil exploitation, obviously looking after the environment? That is to preserve producing and to produce preserving. Because as to exploration and exploitation in hydrocarbons and mining, that's anyhow an important income source to the country, and this could be attained hand in hand with environmental sustainability. We have a sectoral agenda for sustainability, and we have to think about resilient growth regarding climate change and natural disasters risk. And the idea is to see what are we doing in order to be prepared to all the emergency in science, technology, and innovation. This requires capabilities in human talent. It is not only to adopt technology and to achieve advances in what we call the fourth revolution, but we need to transform our human capital. We should strengthen more national innovative ecosystems, and not only national but regional and also public innovation. So what are we considering now? We want to increase social inclusion that is sustainable in the long term.
This productive inclusion to look for coordinated actions between the central level and the territories in order to reduce poverty. There is a field of action that is very important here, because It's in the regions where you have revenues generated. This is where you have social gaps, and that's where we should work in an articulated manner with the central government and territorial entities. It is necessary to have an inclusion policy with the population groups such as indigenous people, people from black African descent people. President Duque has been talking about the orange economy, the bet for innovation, and these are the young people, the cultural activities that together with entrepreneurship in all the progress in technology that may generate great productivity gains, particularly in these young people that if you see, maybe I didn't mention this when we were looking at informality and unemployment rates, maybe the unemployment rate is below 10%. We feel proud that we have unemployment rates that are of one digit, but the young population has an unemployment rate of more than 16%. So we need to work with these young people that are those that will guarantee the pension revenues for the following years, because we will have to work on that. A young employment generates instability towards economic development, and that is very important. The agenda must be focused in providing opportunities for young people. We have to generate also elements to connect that social policy. When we talk about connecting, as I was telling you, the programs of the national government as Familias en Acción, they are limited only to exist, but they do not give the possibilities to the family or to the individuals to have access to the market. So it will be very difficult to generate progress in the economic development. We need to have connectivity between cities and between cities and markets, and population and markets at all levels. For that reason, we talked about connecting territories and favor this. We need to have cities and productivity engines. We need to generate connectivity and to have the link between the urban area and the rural area. The other day I was talking to the governor of Valle, and we were asking how Valle is an example of good management, not only for the management of fiscal resources, because it's ranked as a state that guarantees sustainability. It has a great progress in development. But in the region, there are some other states that are behind. We have Chocó, we have Nariño, Cauca. So how the large cities, the departments that go that are ahead, could in this regional development help through strengthening links and help us with the development of regions. This is a task that it's not done by the national government. It has to be done at the territorial level, and this is when we talk about decentralization. So it is necessary to strengthen policies and investments for regional development to generate fiscal strengthening at the territorial level, so that the territories will be autonomous entities for revenues. Today, there is a difference between the revenues of the territory because of national government transfers. And of course, we have a digital transformation. We have talked about that also. We need to generate digital transformation, and we need to massify access to technology. So it has to go hand in the hand with the, I apologize, but the time, my nose is running. So, and that should be one of the big guidelines, the transportation and logistics for trade, for foreign trade. It's clearly one of the limiting factors in the topics of competitiveness of the country. So what we have in airports, and progress in logistics, this is evident, we know it, and we have to work on a very important national agenda to favor urban mobility, both for freight and for passengers. I think I already repeated this. It cannot be left outside the topic of the agenda. Country stabilization, it is an important agenda. It is important mainly because of the meaning of connecting territories, what means to get to that deep Colombia and to generate instruments and tools that will allow us to reach peace. This is something that needs to be on the National Development Plan. What else should we take into account that has helped us? We have two agendas, two parallel agendas. We have the 2030 agenda complying with the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, and we've signed the agreement of all nations with Sustainable Development Goals. We have 17 goals, 161 targets for Colombia, including goals that have consider that people that and the planet, environmental sustainability, prosperity, justice, and alliance. It is important that the design of the National Development Plan has to do with sustainable development. I'm going to read very quickly because I know the main objective is it's to go back to zero hunger, quality education, clean water, consumption, submarine life, and so we have prosperity, justice, and practically here we have defined a path. In the case of Colombia, just to give you some example, in poverty, Colombia 2030, Colombia will reduce a multidimensional poverty to 8.4%, to increase the labor formality to 60%, to reduce the amount of the deficit in the number of houses or households, to reduce the Gini coefficient to 0.48, we have more than 50, and to reduce the homicide rate to 16%. These are just some examples. We have 160 targets that we have around the 16 goals. So it is giving us a given route, but we need to have in our development plan, of course, to guarantee that these goals for 2030, but we want to be challenging and to set new targets that will be consistent with that trend, long-term trend where we want to go. What do we have in the SDGs? We have a compass document that was signed. It is a 3918 document, and Colombia will comply with the Sustainable Development Goals. There is a follow-up schematic, the Statistical Strengthening Plan, and of course that we have a territorial strategy, and that is the most important thing to achieve and to take the regions where they have the territories. These SDGs will be complied with. The design of the National Development Plan should be done from the territorial level. This is our bet. The idea is to invite so we can work together with the territories in the construction of the National Development Plan, particularly in the methodology of complying with Sustainable Development Goals. The other stakeholder here in the construction of our development plan, it's our access to OECD. We have an agenda ahead of us that is clearly the more valuable contribution entering the OECD that should be included in the development plan has to do with the standards, competition, and environment and sustainable development. We have many topics in the area of international good practices, and so we should gather all of this in the design of the basis for the National Development Plan. We have, of course, we have to fulfill the task of formalizing access to OECD, and besides having the access being formalized, we will have the participation of Colombia in the different committees that are giving Colombia the possibility of participating in these debates that will lead to good practices. So we have our own guidelines. We're thinking about guides for development. We have sustainable development. And what we want now is to invite to the citizens' participation. As I was saying, the idea is to build this national plan from the territory standpoint. We want to work with one of the recommendations of OECD, now that we were talking about that, we should stop thinking in individualities when we think about the regional development. So we should bring along the functions for productivity. We should take advantage in the design of our development plan to think on how we can take advantage of that closeness among cities and to generate what we call proposals for productivity. Cities that are not more than 90 kilometers away, or territories that will have more than 50,000 inhabitants, and based on that functionality, we have more mobility, not only of people, but goods and services. If we apply that methodology, I'm not pretending to take this out, but to take advantage of that added value that we could have in the region in favor of itself and for the regional development. I recall that when the general royalty law was developed, it has a purpose that was to achieve regional development, and that system has been operating for 5 years, and we have approved only 7 projects with that regional development focus. So we should think more in a comprehensive manner, and that sets an additional challenge to have planning not only at national level, but to have planning that we could call an intermediate planning for these supramunicipal development. It is quite challenging. We're thinking that if we continue in this line, this is just a proposal where the National Development Plan should have regional chapters, because as I am saying, if it's a national development plan, but this divergence, regional divergence, which is natural among region, we should also have regional chapters. It is a proposal that we are going to build this together with the research centers so that in each one of the regions where you have a look at the advantages of where they should focus the care of the development plan. We have Antioquia and the coffee growing area. We have Pacific, where Chocó, for example, should have a special look. We have during the central region, we have Bogotá, Boyacá, Cundinamarca, and Huila. Bogotá should be looked at independently from the other states of this region. Santander, the Orinoquia region, it is a very important region, and the long-term development should be done in a particular way. In the Caribbean region, clearly Guajira and San Andres deserve a special treatment, and we have all the Amazon region. What we are going to have is a development plan with a national view, with guidelines, as I stated, but we want to have chapters, regional chapters, and as I was saying, we're going to have support of universities, research centers, constituents, governors, that will help us to have these regional guidelines in our development plan. So how are we going to have these general strategy of the participation of constituents in this planned construction? We have a mandate and the basis of this plan should be ready and should be submitted to the National Planning Commission at the latest on November 15. And these plan guidelines will generate a debate at national level, and these plan lines will help us to build the law that will be taken at the Congress in February next year for the approval during the first half of 2019. So we are going to have working tables for in the regional at the regional level. We're going to have, as I was saying, the support of universities with whom we will go to the region to open dialogue tables, some specific centers, research centers. We're going to have some discussion tables or debate tables at the department level. We will have some special goals. We ask the constituents in their cities, in the region, what do you want? To have included and incorporated in the National Development Plan. And we have a great sphere. President Duque has requested to design a portal to receive all the observations and comments from constituents. And to have formal consultation. We need to have formal consultation, of course, with indigenous people and the communities. We're going to have a social dialogue with victims, also around gender issues, population that has disability conditions. So the National Development Plan not only will be the one that will be mostly consulted, but what we expect as of next week to open all the communication channels, to be enthusiastic and to continue building this together with the other topics, the other goals, both at regional and at department level. We have strategies with universities in order to have meetings with young people and to participate in the plan. So these are our guidelines for the National Development Plan. So we are aiming at improving the equality conditions in the country with legality, with entrepreneurship, with the constituents' participation, following the commitments of the OECD, and aiming at complying with the Sustainable Development Goals. This is what we want to invite you to, so the Colombian entrepreneurs will help us in the construction of this plan. If we feel that it's ours, that it's been built among all of us, I'm sure that it will be easier to comply with. It is not a unique task of the government. This is an invitation we want to make to you. The National Development Plan is of all, and for that reason, we want to have these invitation at national level, so you can help us in the construction of these national development plan. Mr. Botero, thank you very much. So I will be here in any question you may have. Thank you.